Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a new law student, interpreting a will can honestly feel less like practicing law and way more like trying to solve a centuries-old riddle. But don't worry, because today we're going to equip you with a step-by-step detective manual for cracking absolutely any will construction problem you might encounter on your exams.
So let's start with a classic puzzle. Who gets the house? You know the scenario. Someone passes away and they leave behind this poorly drafted, highly confusing will. How exactly does a court decide who gets what? Honestly, it helps to think of a will as a final letter, a puzzle left behind by someone who can no longer speak to answer our questions directly. Take the messy reality of the recent 2025 case Simi Arun Pandya versus Kumudini Mittal. It's a perfect example. Here, the testatrix, a mother named Angori Devi, left specific floors of a house to her son and daughter. The son got the second floor, and the daughter got the first and second floors. Now, the will also mentioned an absolute right to sell for the son after the father passed away. But when the father eventually died without his own will, the daughter stepped up and argued she was entitled to an absolute half share of her father's property. Ultimately, the lower court decided in favor of the son, and the Supreme Court validated it. To untangle complicated cases like this, we're going to follow a 5-step roadmap. The family property puzzle, sitting in the armchair, solving ambiguities and errors, battling inconsistent clauses, and finally, the ultimate construction roadmap.
All right, step 1, the family property puzzle and holistic interpretation.
Jumping back to that Pandya case for a second, the Supreme Court actually backed the son's claim using what we call holistic interpretation. Basically, you can't just cherry pick one clause giving an absolute right and read it in isolation, ignoring the rest of the will. If you do that, it creates these unintended parity issues between the children, totally throwing off the balance the parent actually intended. You have to read the whole document.
Moving on to step 2, sitting in the armchair, the detective's primary tool.
This brings us to a brilliant concept from the classic case of Navneet Lal v. Gogol. It's called the armchair rule. I love this one. It literally requires the judge to virtually sit in the deceased person's armchair and look at the world exactly as they did, just to truly understand their intent. So, sitting in that armchair, what clues is our detective looking for? Well, 4 specific things really. 1, the family relationships. 2, the testator's educational background. 3, the actual state of their property. And 4, even any, rare religious opinions they might have held. By viewing the world through this highly personal lens, the goal is to harmonize the text and give legal effect to every single disposition as much as humanly possible.
Okay, step 3, solving ambiguities and errors. Basically, deciphering the clues.
Now, as a law student, you absolutely must distinguish between 2 main types of ambiguities. First up is a latent ambiguity. This is kind of like a scrambled code, but one you can actually fix. Because the ambiguity isn't obvious just by casually reading the document, extrinsic or outside evidence is allowed. For example, if the will says "my Aunt Mary," but wait, there are 2 Marys in the family, you can bring in evidence to figure out which one they actually met. On the flip side, though, is a patent ambiguity. This one is contradictory right on its face. It's not salvageable, and it ultimately just becomes void. Like if a will gives 1,000 rupees to Aunt A and 1,000 rupees to Cousin X, but then later leaves a silver jug to the above-mentioned Aunt X, well, there is no Aunt X. It's hopelessly confused on the surface.
And hey, what about just plain errors? Well, under the rules, a false description won't necessarily ruin a gift, as long as the object itself is identifiable. For instance, say someone leaves their 3-storied bungalow with tenant A to their son, but actually it only has 2 stories, or the tenant is actually B. The bungalow still goes to the son. It's a lot like getting the wrong street address for the only Starbucks in town. The context supplies the truth, and you still know exactly where to go. Which brings us to step 4, battling inconsistent clauses. What happens when the clues collide? Courts actually have a strict hierarchy to battle these inconsistencies. Step 1 is contextual interpretation. Step 2 is to give effect over nullity. Basically, if a clause has 2 possible meanings, prefer the one that actually gives it effect rather than just making it void. Step 3 is to reconcile and retain, ensuring no part of the will is rejected if you can help it. And finally, step 4, this is our last resort under Section 88. If 2 clauses are just completely inconsistent, you throw your hands up and simply follow the latter or last written clause. A brilliant or maybe tragic example of this breaking point is the classic case of Doe Thomas v. Benyon. In this case, a bequest was completely voided because, get this, 2 people named Elizabeth existed in the family. One had died, and there was another illegitimate relative named Elizabeth. The court ruled that while intention is paramount, the true intention here simply could not be reconciled, so the bequest had to be voided. Sometimes the clues just collide way too hard.
Finally, step 5, the ultimate construction roadmap, putting it all together.
Before we hit the final flowchart, you're going to want to memorize this ultimate cheat sheet for cumulative or multiple bequests. It's simple. If gifts are in the same instrument for the same amount, the legatee takes only one. But if they are in the same instrument for an unequal amount, they take both. And if they are in completely different instruments, like a will and a codicil, for any amount at all, they take both.
So here it is, your definitive 5-step checklist to systematically interpret any will they throw at you. Step 1, apply the armchair rule. Step 2, apply statutory definitions. Step 3, check for ambiguities and errors. Step 4, reconcile those inconsistent clauses. And Step 5, figure out any cumulative or alternative bequests.
Take a mental snapshot of this master flowchart. It brings everything we've just talked about to life visually. You start right at the top, reading the whole will from that armchair. Is the language clear? If yes, great, apply statutory meanings and distribute. If no, check for a patent ambiguity on the surface. If yes, it's void. If no, you look for errors, strike out false descriptions, harmonize any inconsistent clauses using Section 88 as your absolute last resort, and finally, you distribute the assets.
So now that you've got the exact tools to solve these puzzles left behind by people who can no longer speak for themselves, the real question is, how will you apply this roadmap to those dense, complicated cases waiting in your textbook? Are you ready to crack the case on your final exam? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and happy studying.